Welcome to Northern Lights. I'm Dwain.
I'm Mark.
And today we're going to question, is there too much UFC? So it's difficult, isn't it? Because as fight fans, you want as much combat sports as possible. You know, I want to see UFC literally as much as I can. But I think as a UK fan, it makes it very difficult to stay up and watch all these fight nights. And then I get a little bit fatigued on it. I'm like, oh, do I really want to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning and watch a fight night? Especially if it's not a good fight night, you know?
I mean, I can't relate now because I'm back in New Zealand. So every single Sunday could be just my day activity. I just sit down, watch the UFC. That's my day. That's my day, Dwayne. I mean, how nice does that sound? But I'm with you. I mean, you know, when I was back in the UK earlier this year, it's just so hard to stay up, and you've got to ask yourself each time, like, do I really care? Or if there's, you know, like, as in, probably, you know, the filthy casual fans that we are, you know, like, we might only be interested in, say, the main event or a couple of fights on that card. So you're like, well, you've got to sort of gauge it, don't you? Set my alarm for 4 a.m, get up, have a watch, see what it is. But I think the reason why I asked you about this topic in the first place was because there was a couple of weeks ago where it was the first time in a good while that there was no UFC that weekend.
Yeah.
And it almost felt surreal. Not surreal, that's a wrong word, but you know what I mean? It was just like strange, like Saturday night tonight, oh, let's have a look what's on. Oh, wait, nothing. And it was just a bit of a strange, when you've been used to it and you've been accustomed to, you know, whether it's you in the UK, like, you know, waking up and checking the results or trying to find the highlights or something.
Yeah, and it's not just the fights themselves, is it? It's the you know, it's the content around it, isn't it? Like, oh, has Ariel done an interview this week? What's Uncle Shale talking about? You know, and if there's no UFC on that week, they kind of scrape the barrel, don't they? You think, oh, well, this isn't that interesting. That's not that good.
Yeah, that's where you start getting interested in the Twitter wars, isn't it? You know, like, I wouldn't give a shite otherwise, to be
quite
honest.
You stick these Twitter videos on and it's like, Conor McGregor said this, and you know.
Yeah, I know, yeah. You feel like it is scraping. But what do you think, though, Dwayne? Would you prefer, like, for the fight nights and that to be held off and for it all to be projected into, like, maybe a once a month massive super pay-per-view? Or do you prefer it that it's, like, drawn out?
Yeah, well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because now, so on Saturday, from there on out, it's 10 weeks. There's a fight on every weekend. And that is a lot. I think that is too much, to be honest. You know, I like 1, maybe 2 fight nights and a pay-per-view. I'd honestly be happy with 1 pay-per-view and 1 fight night a month. I'd love that because it'd be worth staying up for. I think, oh, I'll stay up, I'll watch this fight night because it'll probably be a bit more stacked and it's worth it. Because the big problem is, I feel like I'm missing out a lot of the time because, like, you know, when you're in New Zealand, you're like, you'll message, oh, yeah, I'll see a message from, oh, did you see that fight last night? It was ace. I was like, no, I was tucked up in bed, you know, pestering my wife, you know, for a kiss. For a kiss.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you know what I mean? So it's like you do miss out on it. And so it makes you a bit jealous. Because that's the thing, we talk about being filthy casuals, but I feel like if UFC was on a time that I could watch it, you know, at a reasonable time, I'd probably watch all of it. I genuinely would. I think every Saturday night, if it was on at 9 o'clock at night, I'd watch it. So that's the difference, isn't it? I guess for like an American audience, and that's really what UFC is aimed at, as an American audience. Perhaps it's not too much, because if you're into football, football's on every week, isn't it? If you're into tennis, that's on every week. If you know, so you think, oh yeah, okay.
And I always thought my reason for defending how it is right now is because, you know, like, fighters will get a main event. You know, and it means a lot. You know, you are the big draw of that particular event. Now, if it, like, say, simmer down to, let's just say, you know, 1 big pay-per-view a month, UFC, you know, the numbered ones, like, you'd see a fighter on the undercard and you think they deserve more than that. But you go, well, yeah, but look who else is on that card as well. You've got actual, you know, current champions, not just someone who, you know, might be a big name sort of thing. And I don't know, let's just say, like, you know, the Golden Goose, if if say Conor would come back and there was 3 title fights on one card, would Conor, even though he hasn't been a champion for years, would he overtake them all and go straight to the main event? Or with this spread out? Sadly, I mean,
you bang Conor on a fight night. You stick him on the undercard of a fight night.
Yeah, I mean, you'd never. I don't even think you'd never see Conor headlining a fight night either. It's just,
no, of course,
But I don't know. It's just one of them, like, you feel as if they wouldn't be getting their chance to shine as like the star of that show if there was just a once a month thing. Like imagine say Jan Blachowicz or something, just for example. If he was on like, the prelims of a fight night, you're like, no, he was champion way too soon a time ago to be on the prelims or something, because if there was 3 title fights, then a couple of, contender fights on there as well.
Yeah.
You'd think, that's just not doing him an injustice.
Yeah, you're definitely right. These fight nights do really help sort of highlight other fighters. Like, look at Qatar. He's fighting Emmett, isn't he, in a couple of weeks, in the week after. And like when Qatar, fought Giga, is that his name, Giga? I don't know.
Giga Chikaze, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. When he fought him, that was an amazing fight. That was a great fight night card.
Yeah.
Awesome fight. If that had been on 275, or maybe not 275, because that is quite that is a bit of an undercard, but if you put that on 276, you probably wouldn't even think about that fight. Like, oh yeah, whatever. Because it's so stacked against them. So you're right. It really does highlight these fighters. So they are good. They're a good merit fight night.
Plus,
so they bring a lot of attention.
The amount of fighters that they've got, I know that they're quite cut happy in the with the actual who they've got on the roster.
Yeah.
But imagine how long would a bloody pay-per-view last? You got all these fighters. If a fighter, like unless you're Kevin Holland, a fighter fights maybe like, twice a year, 3 times at a push. But if you're Kevin Holland, it's weekly.
Yeah.
But, he's just straight from the doctors, straight into the training, isn't he?
Yeah, but you're right. It's like Kevin Holland. If it wasn't for fight nights, he probably wouldn't be as big a name as he is. Because that's really where he's done, like, during that pandemic and all these fight nights, he really pushed forward and that really projected his name. Because he's a big name now, Kevin Holland. Whether he's necessarily a big high-ranked fighter is a different question altogether. Yeah. But he is a big name. And the same for Hamzat as well. Like Hamzat, he fought twice. Did he fight in a fight night? Or was it? Yeah, it was a fight night.
Yeah, it was a fight night.
Then a main event, wasn't it? A pay-per-view, right? Was it?
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Well, they did a few fight nights, and then it because he was on the undercard of the Covington and Woodley as well. That's where he was against Gerald Meerschaert, with the 17-second knockout. So again, he's building this up. It is a great way, and I really do feel for people who wouldn't watch any fight night when they're just not interested at all because they don't, necessarily know the names. You're missing out on so much because there's a lot of. I'm not saying it's like an up and coming place because it definitely isn't, but it feels a little bit sometimes like it's the overspill, but you get so many great fights on there. Sometimes there's fight nights like again, I just mentioned it, the Covington and Woodley one a couple of years ago. That felt like an actual just a main event. There was Cowboy Cerrone on there and everything. So you get like little gems, but I suppose it depends on who you follow as a fan and who you actually rate as a fighter and that kind of stuff. Because if say someone was very new to watching UFC, there's, they'd probably just watch the big ones. Then you say, fight night, and they've never heard of any of them. You're like, okay, well, it's just what you're invested in, isn't it? Because then it just could turn into a guy in red shorts and a guy in blue shorts fighting, and that's it.
Well, that's what UFC is, isn't it? It's very an invested sport. You're really getting invested to these fighters. It's why these press conferences are so important. But I think you're right. I think fight nights, they're a great way to display fighters and really highlight them. But perhaps there is slightly too much. But I do think that's all we've got time for. Thanks everyone for watching. If you can like, comment, subscribe, it really does help us out.